It's a rare burst of energy. Time to make a video. So, as has been reported all over the place, including places that have broken containment from gaming, which is a really good sign. Sony recently announced that they will be discontinuing the production of discs in 2028. I think January of 2028. So we're like at the end of physical media for the large part, because Sony kind of owns the Blu-ray space at this point. So that's worrisome. And while it's to be expected, and we also there's a lot of things that we don't know, it is cause for deep concern. And I also think that it's very backwards thinking, considering the way that the winds seem to be blowing vis-a-vis the audience, right? Especially the younger audience. So personally, I had already been planning on moving mostly to digital for next generation. Although, as I said in my previous video, I don't know if next generation is even in the cards for me with how expensive things are getting. So I might be sitting tight here in the 9th generation, and that might end up being my last big console hurrah, unfortunately. But even planning to mostly go to digital, I have a lot of physical PS5 and PS4 games. I had gone completely digital this generation on Xbox stuff, but there is something about me not really trusting Sony to be all digital, and we've had evidence of that where they've already done some weird shenanigans with, shutting stores down or removing content from their digital platform with no refund, no notice. Just they're gone, and they're gone. But also because for me, Sony is very much a legacy thing going all the way back to the PlayStation 1. And because I'm a collector of Final Fantasy things, I just like having physical PlayStation games. That's just kind of how it's been. I have bought more digital stuff this generation than normal, but it's like single digit numbers of games that I own digitally, as far as like big releases that aren't digitally only games, that are like more indie stuff. But I think there's a lot of evidence. So Sony is going to tell you that, 80% of our sales are digital now. There's been a pretty good amount of scuttlebutt lately that those are completely fabricated numbers. There was apparently that in that big Insomniac leak, there was a lot of evidence to the contrary. And also you can just look at the sales of PlayStation 5 consoles, where the disc version far outsold the digital only version. And when they announced the PlayStation 5 Pro and it wasn't going to have a disc drive, guess what sold out? The disc drives, the add-on disc drives for the PlayStation 5. So I think that there is clearly still an appetite for physical media. And even if people are moving towards digital more and more, you don't want to take choice away from the consumer. I think if you really drill down into the nitty gritty of it, you're going to have people that, they might be like a 50-50 split. They buy some games on digital, they buy some games on physical. I bet it comes down to like the prestige of the game, right? So I would hazard a guess that like a lot of the big Sony first party stuff, your God of Wars and your Horizons and your Last of Us's, I bet those end up selling more on physical because they're kind of event type games and people want something on their shelves. And also you have like a lot of reporting of like Gen Z and below getting back into physical media. They're buying CDs and cassettes, and they're getting into like DVD collecting and stuff like that because they have seen the folly of what happens when you put your trust in a company to have like your whole digital library with them, and then stuff goes poof, stuff goes by, and it sucks. And also, I think that there is kind of a push towards like a more communal thing of like, hey, I can take this over to a friend's house and we can experience it together, or I can loan this to a friend and let them mess with it and whatnot. And especially with games getting more expensive, and I guess this is actually probably the rub of it, right? And what Sony's trying to control is the idea of like, okay, going halfsies with someone on a game, right? We'll split the cost on this game. I'll play it first and then give it to you and you'll play it, right? So with games getting more and more expensive, I could see more people trying to do that. But obviously things need to change, right? It's not good for Sony to have sole control over pricing on their storefront with like no option, especially as we've seen, right? Like they do have quite a number of sales in the year. I would say that they might have more sales in a year than Steam does at this point, but the discounts on those sales aren't what you see on Steam, and there are definitely plenty of examples of games not just like retaining their launch price in the face of far lower physical sales, but even retaining their launch price in the face of digital sales on other storefronts. I've been wanting to pick up Ys 8 because I've been wanting to get into the Ys series, and that sounds like a good jumping on point. And I've been eyeing it on the PlayStation Store because that's where I want to play it. And the last few sales, it has not gone on sale. And at the last Steam sale, it was like 50% off. I didn't buy it there, but because I still want it on PlayStation. But that's kind of, I think, just like a really good example of, Sony is the ruler of that domain, and there's going to be less and less opportunity for people to have competitive pricing. But I also don't think that we know the whole story. And what I need to see is, will the existing PlayStation 5 disk drive be able to be bolted onto a PlayStation 6, or will the PlayStation 6 have a disk drive available? And I think it would be really stupid on Sony's part to not have some sort of provision in mind there, because there are going to be plenty of people who have these collections, and if you're telling them that they can't move that collection forward onto your new machine, and if their existing machine dies out, that they're kind of SOL, because eventually, as time goes on, there's going to be fewer and fewer of those available on the market. That's a good way for people to just go ahead and peace out and jump off. And, obviously there's plenty of online scuttlebutt of, I've said scuttlebutt way too much in this video. There's plenty of online fury over this, and every time people are making their opinion known, I do feel really bad about a lot of the game developers that are getting wrapped up in all of this, because anytime that Sony has posted anything about any upcoming release, it just gets bombed into infinity with people saying no digital, no, or no disc, no buy. And it's like, but that's not that game developer's fault. That's Sony. And I get what you're trying to do there. But I saw somebody angry at Sony for the pricing of like this Black Ops 2 remaster. And it's like, y'all remember that Xbox owns Activision, right? That's an Xbox decision. That's not a Sony decision. And I don't know. There's some unfortunate collateral damage that's happening in this rage. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't rage. They absolutely should. I just hope that it can be done in maybe a more productive way. I'm rambling at this point. I know I had more thoughts, but the burst of energy is running out. So I think I'm going to leave that here. Let me know where you're going with this, what you're thinking about this. At the end of the day, like I said, my big thing is you should have the choice to go digital or physical moving forward. And I think that right now, it's definitely a thing where you definitely vote for with your wallet, right? So like, if you were planning on buying Wolverine, maybe get yourself the disc version this time, right? Like, if you were thinking about buying it digitally, maybe go to a store and pick up a copy, right? Doesn't have to be like a thing that you always do, but I think like in the next 9 months or so, it's a really important thing to do. I'm not sure how much the course of action could be altered at this point, but I could see a scenario where if they aren't already planning for some sort of disk drive compatibility for their next system, enough like fury over this and enough data to show that people are still into this physical stuff might cause them to reconsider that and come up with a stopgap solution that probably just kicks the problem down the road a little bit. And what we really need at the end of the day is really good protections for digital sales and for the consumers buying those digital goods. But it would at least be a stopgap solution, something in the interim. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It definitely sucks. I like my physical games, although, definitely in the last generation or so, it's become less fun to own physical games. And I think that ultimately that was the last thing I wanted to say, is that we're probably reaching the limits of feasibility on what you can do with a disc. And I'm not saying that the solution to that is just get rid of the medium completely. I think what should be done is looking into the next form of physical media, right? So if that's not a 4K Blu-ray, what does that look like? Are we going to some sort of like flash drive cartridge situation a la the Switch? I mean, obviously that has its own issues, but the Switch cartridges are also super tiny because the Switch is supposed to be a portable system. But if you're going more for a traditional console, maybe a larger format of that does make sense for modern gaming. Or maybe there's just some new solution to physical media storage that hasn't been invented yet. And I think that's where people should be looking. I think that there does need to be something that is available for people to have tangibly and in their hand. Especially there's so many examples of, well, when a company goes under, like that game just vanishes, right? Like sometimes the rights don't revert to a publisher or something like that. They're just in limbo and that game just can't be purchased anymore. And there needs to be a way to, and it's not like, I know Sony doesn't care about game preservation. I care about game preservation. You probably care about game preservation, but there's a lot of it that's just like optics, right? And about the feeling of the consumer. If the consumer does not feel confident in your platform, then they become skittish and then they don't want to engage with your platform. They don't want to purchase things for your platform. And I think that there needs to be a lot of goodwill. I think Sony's silence on this whole thing is far more damaging than they seem to think it is. I think they think that they're affecting, they crunched the numbers along the lines and decided we can leave this part of the audience in the past, but I think they're miscalculating those figures. And I think that it's going to have a knock-on effect where people who don't even care about where, like how they buy their games digitally or physically, are just going to be angry about it in principle and then opt out as well. So yeah, it's a rough time and everything seems to suck these days and it is super depressing. Games have always been my bastion of calm in the world, and more it's become less that. That sentence made more sense in my head. But that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. Would love to know what you think in the comments down below. We'll do some of that, but I'm going to take off. I have a podcast to edit. Y'all have a good one and take care. Bye.